NEBOSH have announced major changes to their NEBOSH General Certificate. And in this video, I'm going to tell you what these changes are and how they affect you if you're an existing NEBOSH student or you're about to start. These changes affect both the national and international students. Every 5 years, NEBOSH reviews its syllabus and what we call the specification. And the last time it was reviewed was back in 2020. And well, it's now being reviewed again. So we're moving from the 2018 specification to the 2025 specification. Now, if you've previously passed the NEBOSH General Certificate, this doesn't mean that your old certificate is out of date and you need to do it again. No, nothing like that. Your NEBOSH General Certificate does not expire. If you passed it 20 years ago, it's still valid. It just means that students who sit assessments in the future may have different assessments and a different syllabus. But the certificate that they receive is just the same as the certificates before. Now we will be transitioning, I love that word, transitioning to a new specification from February onwards. And we're going to have a little bit of a crossover between the old specification and the new specification throughout 2026, because some of you have already started and you may stay on the old specification. And some of you have yet to start, or you've yet to sit the assessments, and you will be moved on to the new specification. Now, the biggest change is around the practical project. And so those people who are going to stay on the old specification will do the old practical project, which we currently call NG2 and IG2. Those people who are going to move on to the new specification will do the new project. And I'm going to tell you all about that in a moment. Hey, sorry to interrupt. If you're regretting your choice of course provider and you'd wish you studied with me instead, there's no problem. You can. Why don't you head over to Google right now and Google Compassa Rescue. Search for that and go to our Rescue package. This is available for both international and national General Certificate students. Perhaps your course has expired. Perhaps you've failed one of the assessments and you don't know what to do next. Perhaps you're just not happy with the level of teaching or support you're getting from your course provider. In that case, come check out the Rescue package and click on Apply Now. We will offer you a very special discount so that you can get access to our full General Certificate course with all of my tutor support, all of our mock exam support, NG2, IG2 project support, all of our video tutorials, study books, PDF guides. You will get everything that we offer to our own students. And then you will have a chance of joining us with some of the highest pass rates in the NEBOSH e-learning industry. Let's get back to the advice. Now, firstly, just to confuse absolutely everybody, the unit codes are going to change. So at the moment, we talk about NG1 and NG2. If you're an NGC national student, well, we're not going to call them NG1 and NG2 anymore. We're going to call them GNC1 and GNC2. So the new official unit codes are GNC1. I assume that stands for General National Certificate 1. And General National Certificate 2. And I'm just going to call them GNC1 and GNC2 for short. Now, if you're an international student studying the NEBOSH IGC course, then we're going to call it GIC1 and GIC2. Because here it is, it's GIC1 and GIC2. You know what, I really started to hate these acronyms. NEBOSH are going to run out of acronyms one day. Now, in terms of syllabus changes, there are some very minor changes to the syllabus. Just little tweaks here and there. So broadly speaking, like they're almost exactly the same. Very few changes. There is one change which I think is worth mentioning for the NEBOSH National General Certificate students, and the change is as a result of something we call Martin's Law, which is about the risk assessment of premises, which could be, I don't know, subject to what we call a TAC. So this has been inserted into the syllabus here. Understand when a premises or an event falls under the requirements of the Protection of Premises Act 2025. Broadly speaking, that's a fairly minor change, but if you are going to do the exam in the future, you could get asked a question on that, so make sure you have that studied. Now, these changes are going to start as of February 2026, so we'll start to see the very first courses for the new specification delivered in February 2026, with the very first assessments from March 2026. Now this is how it's going to affect you as a learner. If you are a brand new learner and you sign up for a course from say February onwards, you are automatically going to go onto the new specification and you won't know any different because you'll just start your course and study. But if you've already started your course, let's say in 2025, how does it affect you? It depends on whether you've already sat your NEBOSH project and whether you've passed or not. Now, if you've already submitted your NG2 and IG2 and you have passed that, but you've yet to pass the exam, you will remain on the old specification, which is the 2018 specification. So for all intents and purposes, nothing really is going to change for you at all. Now, if you have submitted your NG2 or IG2 project and you did not pass, you were referred, failed, then you will remain again on the old specification. So all you have to do is just make some changes to your project to meet the criteria and resubmit. However, a little bit of a tip here. You can, if you want, if it's useful, you can request to move on to the new specification. And if you have major changes to make to your project, like if the examiner just basically took your project and just started ripping it to shreds and just ripped you a new one, and you have to do a major rewrite, I suggest it might be a good idea to request a move onto the new specification, because the new version of the project is very different and, in my opinion, much easier to pass. And you might be able to recycle a lot of your old project and put it in the new one. So more about that in a moment. If you have not yet attempted your NG2 or IG2 project, you will be automatically moved onto the new specification. And so you will be attempting the GNC2 project or the GIC2 project, which is, in my opinion, an absolutely brilliant thing because that new project is going to be much easier to pass.
It's perfectly simple. If you're not getting your hair cut, you don't have to move your brother's clothes down to the lower peg. You simply collect his note before lunch, after you've done your scripture prep, when you've written your letter home before rest, move your own clothes onto the lower peg.
But as far as the exam is concerned, the GNC1 or the GIC1 exam, nothing's really changing. It'll have a new code. Instead of NG1, it'll be called GNC1 or IG1, GIC1, but it's still an open book exam, still got a scenario, broadly the same syllabus. It's going to be the same type of questions marked in the same way. During this transitionary phase, we're going to have some students doing the old specification and some students doing the new specification. For those of you staying on the old specification, doing the old exam or the old project, you are going to have up until August 2026 to pass your assessments. If you have not yet passed both of the assessments by August 2026, you will be automatically changed over to the new specification. But don't worry, that doesn't mean you lose your results. It doesn't mean that if you've passed your NG1 exam, it doesn't mean that you've lost it and you have to do it again. No, your results will be carried over onto the new specification. But if you haven't yet passed your old NG2 project, then at that point you'll be switched over onto the new specification and you'll just have to write the brand new GNC2 project. Now, the timeframes can be pretty confusing, and it can also be a little bit confusing as to, do I stay on the old, do I stay on the new? Best advice is go contact your course provider and find out whether you're changing or not. Or drop me a comment in the comments below and I'll try and help based on what you tell me. Now, let me tell you about this project. Now, the first big change with the project, which we call GNC2 or GIC2, is that it's no longer a simple pass or fail assessment, because that NG2 IG2 project has been pretty difficult to pass, because sometimes the tiniest little error means you don't meet the marking criteria and it fails. That will no longer be the case. Hallelujah, hallelujah. No, it's going to be marked out of 100 marks and you will only need 60 marks to pass. It's going to be a 60% pass mark. Hallelujah. And I expect every single one of you, if you follow the instructions of course, every single one of you to pass on your very first attempt. So let's take a look at this new project, and you're going to see that actually it has a lot of similarities, especially in the first half, a lot of similarities with the old one. So here's the template document, and you'll see it looks pretty similar to the existing NG2 IG2 document. We've got a section 1, the background about the organization, and then we've got a bit about what I call the methodology, sources of information, how we identified hazards. But notice now, we've got these numbers in brackets, just like on an exam. These are the marks available for every section. So here we've got 1 mark, 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks, and 3 marks. If we add that up, I think that's 10 marks, isn't it? So you've got 10 marks for your introduction. Says that the number of marks per section is indicated in brackets next to each topic name. If we move on to the risk assessment looks broadly similar in the sense that it's still a 5 steps to risk assessment. You know, it's hazard, who might be harmed and how, controls, and so on. But to make it absolutely clear that every hazard needs a hazard category, look what they've done here. This is very, very different. Hazard category, hazard description, hazard category, hazard description. We're still going to use a similar system of categorizing each hazard, and NEBOSH now want only 10 hazards, whereas before you were free to have 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, however many hazards you liked. NEBOSH now say only 10 hazards. Any hazards more than that will not be considered. They will not be marked. And we can see this section here is worth a total of 15 marks. You're going to get 5 marks for your 5 hazard categories. You can have more hazard categories if you like, but you need a minimum of 5 to get the 5 marks. And every hazard description which is good enough, as in it's specific, it's well written, clear, and it's a real hazard, not one of those, you know, dodgy hazards that I've told you about before. If you can do that, you'll get 1 mark for every hazard. So that would be 10 marks maximum. But if only 7 of your hazards are well written, you'll only get 7 marks. Then we've got the who might be harmed and how. That's an even bigger section. That's worth 20 marks in total. You're going to get 1 mark for every who that's correct, and you'll get 1 mark for every correct how people might be harmed. So you're going to have to describe, right, who's going to be harmed and how exactly, like what's the incident, what's the injury they could suffer, and so on. And if you do that really well, you're going to get 2 marks for every hazard. 1 mark for the who, 1 mark for the how. Sorry to interrupt the advice. If you would like more free advice on how to do your NG2, IG2 practical project, please explore our channel. We have 2 playlists you'll find super useful. We've got one here called NEBOSH NG2 IG2 hazards, covering nearly all, or maybe all, of the hazards and hazard categories that you'll have to use. And we've got another one called 15 daft mistakes to avoid. And well, it may even have more than 15 by the time we're finished. Lots of mistakes that you have to avoid if you want to pass. If that's not enough, then head over to our website, where you will find on compassa.co.uk in the NEBOSH help section, you've got study books for NG2 and IG2, and also you've got various exam technique guides, you've got instructions on how to do the project, and you've also got courses on how to do your project. Anyway, let's get back to the advice. Then we've got a box on the controls here. Now, if we take a look at the guidance document, which they have kindly provided us with, but notice that these are pretty good controls. Here we've got an option to try to eliminate the working at height, and here we've got another option to change the process so that there are fewer people exposed. So we're going to choose some really good, really effective actions. And if you can do that, you should get 1 mark for your existing controls and then another mark for your further actions. So that's another 2 marks per hazard. That's another 20 marks. The next column, the who is to carry out the action, that doesn't get any marks at all, but you should still fill it in for completeness. And then in the third one here, we're going to get some marks for the timescales. Now, there's a major change on the timescales, because previously NEBOSH have not liked timescales like immediate. You know, they've always preferred 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and so on. But that's going to change with this new GNC2 or GIC2. They want these 3 timescales to be used: the immediate, the medium term, and the long term. And they give definitions as to what that means. So you just have to put down what you think is a sensible and proportionate timescale for whatever actions you have chosen. Now, so far, the whole thing's looking pretty similar to the old project, but in part 3, or what's now called section 3, it changes significantly. In the previous one, you had to choose 3 actions and then write a sheet for each of those actions, explaining why you've selected it as a priority. Now we're not going to do that. We're going to fill in 1 sheet only, and we're going to choose not an action, we're going to choose a hazard to focus on. So we're going to prioritize a hazard, which makes a lot more sense in my view. So we then have to state which of these hazards we've written up here. We've got all these hazards here, 10 of them. Which of those 10 hazards have you chosen as a priority? You're only allowed to choose one. And then we have to set out a minimum of 2 legal reasons to get 2 marks. And then there's moral reasons for 2 marks. And there's some business or financial reasons for another 2 marks. We've got some general reasons. What's a general reason? Well, let's take a look at the guidance, shall we? What do we mean by a general reason? General reasons, here it is in the guidance. Give some examples. It says, it's important this hazard is prioritized as currently the control measures are inadequate to effectively manage the risk. The controls focus on awareness and not risk reduction. Likelihood of harm is high, severity of harm is high. Okay, so there you go. Some examples there of what we call general reasons to manage this hazard, or to prioritize. General reasons to prioritize this hazard. We then have to explain how the further actions, which further actions? The ones in your risk assessment. So if you've chosen that actions from hazard 10, maybe you've got 2, 3 actions in there. You have to explain why those actions are going to help reduce the risk. So that would be, how do they reduce the likelihood? Why do they reduce the likelihood? Do they reduce the severity? Why do they reduce the severity? And so on. So explain why they help reduce the associated risk. And then finally, what is going to be your process for checking that the actions that have been carried out, how do you check that those actions have been effective at controlling the risk? So what checks are you going to do to check that they've actually worked? So I think all of that is 17 marks, and then all of section 1 is 10 marks. And so what does that mean? It means the bulk of your marks are going to come from this risk assessment right here. Now, there are some other changes to consider. At the moment, your project is submitted to your course provider. So if you're a Compassa student, then you will submit the project to us, and we submit it to NEBOSH. It's a bit of a pass the parcel type affair. That's going to change. And as of March, when we do this particular assessment, it's going to be submitted directly to NEBOSH. Yes, it's going to simplify the administration considerably, at least for me. The other thing which is going to change, and this is not good news, but there are some very good reasons for it, is that it's going to take a little bit longer to get your results. I'm not going to go into the reasons, but instead of 50 working days to get your results, it's going to take 60 working days to get your results. So instead of approximately 10 weeks, it's going to take approximately 12 weeks in total. I mean, once you've waited 50 days, waiting 60 days is not that big of a deal. I mean, it's a long time already. It's going to take a little bit longer. But this is going to help ensure that the qualification and the assessments retain their integrity, as in the marking is reliable. And that does matter, doesn't it? So just to summarize, there are going to be some major changes which may or may not affect you depending on your circumstances. If you've yet to submit your NG2 or IG2 project, this is absolutely brilliant news, because this project, I suspect, is going to be much, much easier to pass. If you've already submitted your project and you have failed on a little baby thing, then I suggest you just stick to the old specification and just make that tiny little change and resubmit and just pass as easily as you can. But if you have submitted your project and you've failed on multiple points and it requires a big rewrite, it may be easier to just switch to the new specification and then do the new project, possibly recycling parts of your old risk assessment and using those parts in the new risk assessment. Speak to your course provider if you want any further information on that. Anyway, if you've got any questions about how any of that works, please ask me below and I'll try and figure out the answer for you.